Welcome to our space where talking about the inspiring things with inspiring people is what inspires us. Waiting for you here are the infinite possibilities that creation, collaboration, and connection have to offer. A universe where we see everything through rose-tinted spectacles that help us to keep our faith in the power of imagination alive and well. And now, let's talk. Lecturer, fashion illustrator, and illustrator with more than 40 years of experience, our super special guest today, Dray, can be found in London Fashion Week, painting and drawing from life in shows for designers such as Vivienne Westwood and Pam Hogg. But also she was course leader at London
College of Fashion
for 8 years, teaching fashion illustration.
That's correct, yeah.
And also she was the first artist in residence for Fashion Scouts in 2018, and she was painting from life in her easels alongside all the fashion photographers or the press photographers. Her motivation in life, in the arts, is to bring movement and spontaneity to mark making and to bring the life drawing or the painting from life back to the curricula of the fashion students. So I'm very, very, very proud to have you with us today. And I was thinking that May is the month of the mental health awareness. We had the opportunity to share a lovely event in commemoration of the women of the world in March, I think 2018, if I'm not wrong, or 2019. And I think I have the feeling that for you, drawing and painting has been something very important to keep you sane. What do you have to say regarding that?
A lot. Well, of course. I mean, I think all artists would say that it is their release. It is most definitely their release, because when you are drawing, you are, most definitely in your inner most sanctum, and that you can, really learn, really kind of calms you, and you're almost in a meditative state, so that you're not thinking about anything other than that creative process. So art most definitely is a platform for helping any kind of mental condition or mental state. I mean, I did my MA. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but I did my MA when I was 40, just given birth to my second daughter. And I thought my life was kind of a little bit over at that point. Oh, here I am, 2 children, there's no work. All illustration had finished because of digital. It was the beginning of the 90s. There was no work. And so I, because of everyone was doing Photoshop. And so I went back to do my MA, and I did it in communication design, but I did my thesis in art therapy. Mm-hmm. So I actually used myself as a case study, and I put my studied art therapy and used inner child therapy to dialogue with myself.
I wanted to ask you about that, because I have tried to understand when people talk about child therapy, what does that mean? But I never heard about this technique in relationship with the drawing and with the art. And you mentioned that in a talk that you give in Paris or in France at some point. And it was, wow, this is really interesting. What do you do when you apply that technique?
That technique? Well, it really is. If you're doing it in the therapy, you're meant to dialogue, right, with your left hand and your right hand, and whichever is your non-dominant hand. I mean, my non-dominant hand is my left hand. Okay. So that is your inner child. And your dominant hand is the critical parent, and not physical parent, but the parent within us.
Okay.
So the one that
created.
The one that you have created because of all the outside influences that you have picked up along the way. The one that tells you can't do something, tells you you're no good, tells you you're not, right enough or, perfect enough or whatever. So that's the critical part of you, and the non-dominant hand is the inner child, they call it. So you dialogue by writing, and that you meant to ask each other questions, and you're actually you meant to meditate before you start as well. That's the whole process of it, to calm yourself, and then you have this dialogue, and apparently the dialogue gets quite aggressive. You know, you can start swearing with this hand and being horrible, and this hand's telling you off, and that hand, you know. So you're trying to have this dialogue, but I thought I would take
simultaneously.
Well, I mean, I think that sometimes it can be, because it's like drawing. You know, it becomes quite, you know, it's quite physical, and it's meant to be done with a controlled environment, obviously. But I was taking that a step further into my work. So because I really wanted to release what I was doing. My work became very controlled up until that point. All through the 80s, I was producing work that was very time consuming to do, very meticulous. I wanted to make sure everything was right and detailed, and the hands had to be right, that everything was, you know, perfect. And I wanted to break out of that, and I wanted to really find something that had more of a voice and more of a heart to the soul, to the work. So I started to draw with my left hand, which is my non-dominant, so like a child, and then I was using this hand to render it and colour it and you know, make it, you know, presentable, so the work came out from that. And then I was actually then thinking about childhood traumas and incidences that I wanted to illustrate, and so I was drawing them with this hand, and they were much more honest and much more open, and they had more of a voice to them, and it was a prelude to what I do now, because now I just go in like I'm almost not even thinking about what I.
It was just the beginning of
it was the beginning of finding myself. I'm finding a different way of making a mark, because I didn't want to control it anymore.
And it's incredible, because you paint since always, and you draw since always, since you were very little. And you were always very interested in colors, in the way people present themselves, let's say clothes, and very impressionist, expressionist always. And but your style did change a lot since that moment you are mentioning. Yes. And you have like a period, an intermediate period before, when you were working in the 80s, your style was very different, then a transition, and then now. How do you feel when you see your old drawings? How do you relate with that style?
I can't believe I spent so long doing them. And they're huge. And these were going to publishers this big, and the art director would kind of go, "Oh my God, Dray always draws so big." You know, everyone was coming in with little paintings, because we had to take the artwork to obviously the art director that wasn't digital. So, but I couldn't draw anything that was big, and it was really finished to a very high degree. So they used to take me an awful long time, and I used to use a coloured pencil a lot in those days, and I've still got a little ridge here because of literally the rendering was so kind of meticulous that it actually deformed my
find
finger.
The colours you wanted to
get the right intensity of colour and detail. And so they took me a long time, and I used to go through all my friends, all my family, anybody I could get my hands on to do photo shoots to set up the illustration. Then I would paint from the setup that I photographed. So that's how, you know, I had to plan ahead. I had to get the idea, then I had to get my models, I had to do a photo shoot, and then I did the illustration. So it was quite a long process.
Do you now draw from imagination?
I can. I do like being inspired by something I see first. I like to have a spark of something, and that's what, you know, going to London Fashion Week, that obviously you see something. I like to respond. So I like to make a guttural response to what I see. So, and I don't have to majorly look at it. Obviously I am looking at it, and I can look at it really quickly now and see exactly what I want, and then I get it down. So half of it I'm working from my memory of what I'm seeing, and half of it I'm working from what I'm seeing. And then the other half I'm putting in my own, obviously, my own take on whatever I want to.
It's obviously for you, the background has always had an importance when you did when you do digital drawings, when you draw from in a piece of paper. There's always a reference that put that figure, that subject in context somehow. And when you look at the drawings, illustrations, paintings you were doing for example, women's press or spare rib, what was more important at that point? What was important, a narrative of yourself, of the world you were living in? What was really important for you at that point, and now how that has changed?
I mean, the thing is, then I was an illustrator. I was a working illustrator, and so I was given a brief and I had to fulfill that brief. You know, obviously they liked my style, but that brief had to be fulfilled. So there was lots of criterias that I had to work with that were given to me. So it would have been, we're doing the spare rib, that particular cover I did was about lesbians in the British Army, and women in the British Army.
That's why they are,
which was like, you know, obviously quite, even to talk about that then was quite unusual, because it was, I think that cover was 1982.
Did you like to get in touch with the author of the
I did actually
article?
I did not the article, but I did get in contact with the woman who run Spare Rib not that long ago, because she's archiving all the work to put into the British Library, because it's an important magazine. It was the beginning of women's liberation, and that this was an underground magazine, so to speak, as well as all the gay press that I worked for at the time. I mean, we were all fighting for our liberties then.
Where could you find that magazine at that time?
You could subscribe to it and they'd send it to you in the post. If you lived there was a couple of bookshops in Islington, or there was one in Charing Cross Road actually that would sell it, but you couldn't just go and buy it anywhere. It was, you know, it's something that you had to subscribe to usually to get it. But I was just wanting to, with that particular one, it was very much about what the background image is, all the insignia, the different insignia that the army have. So I kind of used that as a wallpaper for the background, and had two women kind of just looking at each other. But it was really setting a scene most of the time for the story. I did a lot of book jackets in the 80s, and I had to read the books, which was great. So I was working for people like Weldon, who I love, and Margaret Atwood, and John Mortimer, all great storytellers. So I'd be reading all their books, and then I would come up, and they'd say, come up with, and they wanted, obviously people, because they know I love drawing people, and that's what I drew, come up with a scene that doesn't give the story away. So it's like setting the stage for the story. So that was the premise. And then anything else that was in the illustrations was extracted from the story. So if it was something about a woman wanting to give birth, there might be a full moon in there. There might be, you know, references to how to have a baby book in the story somewhere.
It is quite difficult to not be too literal, and at the same time being faithful to the story, and being able to give a little bit of information about what the story is about. But how do you not get too literal? I think is the more interesting aspect of finding the symbology in each element you choose to represent that story. And why these days that work has stopped. Why, for example, we don't have any more cookbooks with a lot of illustrations?
I've done cookbooks.
It should be. I know, but why?
I love doing cookbooks. But I don't know.
It's just trends.
It's trends. It is trends. It is trends. And I do think the pendulum swings back. But the heady days of illustration in the 80s, I mean, we literally never stopped working. And the money was amazing.
Okay.
I mean, nowadays the money would seem, oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Would you consider that the 80s
we got paid
very
better.
Strong?
Yes.
moment for illustrators.
Yeah. That the 80s were, because there was a lot of money in the 80s too. It was the boom, sort of the yuppie boom, and there was a lot of money put into advertising, shops, and publications, and it was a real kind of boom time after the 70s, which were quite depressed. So there was a lot of money around, and literally you would get thousands of pounds for doing an illustration, which of course nowadays you would.
Do you keep record of all those illustrations? And for example, the book jackets, I would love to have all of them. Like,
I think in a cupboard, which I'm going to go through, it's my lockup, I have got pretty much all the book jackets. Now, I don't have all the artwork, though I have got a fair amount of it, because I didn't really sell the artwork. I might have done, but I didn't really sell it, particularly if it was an important piece and I liked it. But I have got somewhere the book jackets. I have. But I've got to find them, but they're not readily available right now, but I'll find them.
And it's interesting because after that boom of the 80s came the depression, I would say, of illustration.
Well, the 90s, yes.
Yeah, the 90s.
Well, digital came, didn't it?
Digital came. And could you describe how did you experiment that moment when digital came and it felt probably like, okay, we are not going to work any longer. Yes, and then is that why you decided that you wanted to start teaching? And when you started thinking about going to America, why America? I'm quite curious about all this movement in your life, because also you weren't that young. You already had two kids.
I was 40.
So maybe
seems young
you were
now.
40
is very young.
But no, it is quite interesting. Why America? Why not here, for example? Why not teaching here?
Well, I actually was teaching a little bit in England. I think even nowadays, most freelance illustrators do one day somewhere. And also it's lovely to go in and teach, and you keep active with all the young people. And it gives you as much sometimes as you give. Full-time teaching is very different, but going in one day a week or once a month was lovely. So I was doing a tiny bit of that before then, but America, but getting back to it literally was overnight. We had Illustrator ringing each other up going, I've got no work. There's absolutely no work. The phone hasn't rung for weeks like on end, bad. And I've got a mortgage and and I can't pay the rent. Literally, it was so frightening. It was shocking how quickly it literally stopped. And I think it must have been 1990. I had my first child in 1991, and I was struggling then to get work, to consistent work. Work was coming, but it was very little.
Sounds scary.
So it was scary. I decided I wanted to teach in America because I grew up in America.
Okay.
And my father was in the army. I grew up in Africa.
In Lagos.
Lagos.
Yeah.
And then we moved to America. So
Nigeria, is that?
Nigeria, yeah. That was the most. I think that my love of colour and my love of vibrancy of that was kind of embedded into my brain then, actually, because it woke me up visually, and I remember flying out there, and I was only 5, and hitting the wall of heat that we got.
Wow.
Took 3 days to fly to Africa from England then. We had to change planes, stay in a hotel, get back in the plane again, little tiny planes. It was 1957, I think.
Sounds great.
So it was. So that was that, and so America came soon after that. My father was. He actually was a spy. I didn't realise it. I know.
You need to write a book.
He worked for the CIA.
Maybe a graphic novel.
I know. He had so many stories, but so America's always been very dear to my heart. I love America. It's like because by the time we got to America, I was 10. And we stayed there till I was like 14. So
where in America?
Virginia, Deep South, 1963 to 66, which was right in the middle of the civil rights movement. And Martin Luther King was assassinated, and John F. Kennedy was assassinated on the ship as we were going over. So when we got there, it was a height of all the tensions. And I had never really I didn't really understand I didn't understand racism. I didn't understand why they were the people that were being so horrible. I mean, and segregation and bus stops with, people for black people to sit on that one and white people, and two doors into a shop. And I'm
so
like,
you
I
have
just,
memories
after
of that
being in
kind of
Africa
reality.
when we were like socializing with Africans all the time, and then suddenly it was like, now you can't talk to those people. As a girl of 10, I found that, I just remember thinking, this doesn't feel right. It was a very strange time to be there, but also it was the 60s, and so it was kicking off as well with all the Beatles and all the fashions that were coming out. So but America's always had a soft spot, and I've lived there on and off quite a lot over the years. It's my go-to place, even though I got a love-hate relationship with their politics.
Yeah.
But thank goodness it's looking good at the moment. But America, it's great, and I love anything 1950s. I just love that era. So America epitomized that for me, with all, especially when I went there in the 80s. It was like neon signs. They've kind of disappeared a little bit, those, but all that hangover stuff from the 50s and 60s was still very much there in the 70s and 80s when I went there a lot, and I just loved all that. I just couldn't get enough of that. I love that sort of
that nostalgia.
That nostalgia, and I had a Cadillac too when I lived there. Beautiful 1961
It's all about the objects.
It's about the objects. Sorry, that's why I've got a poodle.
But that's great, because it shows me that you relate with the things you draw, for example, in an emotional way, in a sentimental way. It's not just because you relate every single step of your life with something. I saw a drawing of you when you were 5. When you were 5, and there was a kid with a handbag. It could be perfectly a Gucci, but I am like that a bit. Also, I relate in an emotional way with the world that surrounds me. That's why I care about this or that or this or. And when did you go back to England? How old were you?
When I was there with my parents, at 63, we came back to England, and then we moved to Germany. I mean, I didn't really live in England until I was about 20 or 19 when I went to college.
So
I was out of England most of my growing up years. So
and you moved to London. Did you move to London?
Yeah, I moved to London.
So that was for you also kind of. You were also kind of a tourist in this city.
Yeah, it kind of felt like I didn't know London at all. I was like, and all my experience had been outside of England, really. But yes, that's kind of, and I didn't really have any friends, and no school friends, because school friends were all over the world. So you feel like you're sort of starting out again in the country, yeah. And it was exciting coming to London. But it was 70s, it was 71, 72. It was London was like a bomb site back in those days. It was very depressed. After the 60s, London took a lot, the whole of the 70s was, well, we had blackouts and a 3-day week, and we had rubbish in the streets. They didn't collect the rubbish for weeks. We had to walk through this piles of rubbish as you're walking through Ladbroke Grove, and it was quite an interesting time to live in. But I don't think I ever really thought about it. You just live in it, don't you? You don't really nothing else to compare it to in a way. Well, you do, but I mean, that was where I was, and it was exciting
you
too.
live your reality, and,
yes.
Yes. And it was also an interesting time to be in London, and because of the punk movement,
and everything,
and all the philosophy of life was getting from very optimistic to a little bit more nihilistic. And how did that affect your work?
It became brutal. I don't think I've ever shaken that off. I mean, we used to draw all the punks that came in off the street in our life drawing classes. That's how we got our models, and so they'd all come in like with broken noses and kind of mohawks, and I loved it. It was just like and I was very lucky to sit next to Jo Brocklehurst, who is my icon. She sadly died, but she was illustrator of the 80s scene. And her style was kind of brutal too, and I loved that. And I like the fact it's raw, these are real people. There's nothing romantic about it. We weren't getting, you know, any lovely girls coming waltzing in. We know whatever a lovely girl is, but you know what I mean. That kind of glamorous. It was all just punks, basically.
And it was about the fashion. It was about drawing the models dressing their clothes, or it was about nudity.
No, they were mainly. Well, I mean, obviously we had life drawing classes, but it was mainly they were clothed. So they all had their fabulous clothes on, or you know, their leather jackets and you know their fabulous big Doc Martin boots, and they were great. I love drawing
all the iconic aesthetic.
Yes, I mean it was just kind of like and because you can't draw that daintily, you've got to kind of go and make it powerful because it felt powerful.
Yeah.
And I think that my style was my drawing hand. I think was kind of developed then because of what I was drawing and the times. You know, that was. You go around Covent Garden because it was around the corner from Central St. Martin, and it was closed up, barricaded, except for a few clubs in the basement, and so it was kind of it felt raw and everything. It felt real. So I wanted to make that line that was strong. I wanted to have a strong line. I developed that then. That's most definitely.
And the moment when you decided that you wanted to go to America to teach there, was it related with the depression of the 90s? What time are we talking about? And what did you have to do to finally realize it, make this dream come true?
I had to do my MA. And, you know, to go and work in America, I knew I had to have my MA. I didn't have my MA.
Okay.
So I had to have that qualification. So I thought, well, I'll go back. Now's a good time. I can go back. I can, you know, get a little grant because I'm a single mother. I've got children. I'll be able to do it. And my mother said she'd help look after the children when I went. And I get this qualification. I'll go and live and work in America, you know, as you do. But
not for everyone. Everything sounds so
simple,
easy and simple. But you wanted. You really wanted to do it.
I really wanted it, and so I did my MA. But I have to say, to be honest with you, when I went to do the classes, and I had my baby, and I'm listening to the lectures. We went in like once a week. I was listening to the lectures about semiotics and psychology and ergonomics, and I'm sitting there going, I really do not understand a single word they're talking about. Like, I don't understand. And this is too much for me. Who do I think I am? It's overwhelming. And my head was like swimming. And I just remember coming home a few times going, I have to say, I can't do this. I have to hand my notice in, so to speak. And then I was sitting after a lecture and I remember this so clearly, in the canteen, and these two young lads who'd come straight from college, so they were like in their like 23, 24, sitting talking about the lecture we just had, which I didn't understand, and they were going, did you understand a word that woman said? And they went, no, I didn't understand a word of it, but I'll have a look, you know. And I went, oh,
so
okay.
It's a general problem. Okay. It's not my problem.
It's okay. That is why we're here, to learn, and we're learning a whole different level. So I thought, okay, I can do this. I've just got to focus my mind on it, which I did. It took me a tiny bit longer I think about 6 months longer than the course to get because I had the children and everything, but they allowed me an extension. And my mother, bless her heart, she rang me up one day because she was an avid reader of the newspaper. You know, she got the Times or whatever, and she said, "There's a job going in America. They're advertising. You should apply." And I'm like, oh, right. So I literally applied. I was interviewed in the Landsborough Hotel, which is lovely, you know, and I got the job.
Wow.
I know. I literally got the job, and I went over there without the children. I kept them for 6 months or 4 months in London, and I got there and I was like, what am I doing?
Why
am I here? What this is? It almost came too quickly because it was like, and then my father said, don't be silly, calm down, you'll be fine. The children are coming out next month, you'll be fine. Just sort out somewhere for you all to live.
Sometimes when changes happen with so short notice, you don't have time to accommodate.
No.
But if it happens, it's because it was for you. It was for you. How much did you grow with that experience? How much your art also, because I know you had to put a little bit aside your practice as an artist, because you were teaching and you were focus on that activity. So you also grow somehow. You learn how to deal with frustration and also keep your inspiration alive somehow. Where were your tactics or the ways you were finding moments to draw after all, or keeping alive your creativity?
It's interesting. I think it's I just did, really. I think because I can't not. I've always had a sketchbook on the go. I've always had a sketchbook, so that was something that was going. But I had just finished my MA, so I'd done all that work on inner child therapy, which was all that. It was quite soul searching, and all the work was very personal. So then when I got to America, and I found, that when the kids went to bed at night, I had my desk, and I started to just do illustrations based around, I used my children, everything they said, which was funny or silly or ridiculous, that, to an adult you laugh and go, that I wrote it down, and then I would make an illustration of what they said, and it would really be, so it was a children's book, but for adults, because some of the things were weren't really for children, they were twisted around. Like there's a woman, the mother cutting the father's head off with a pair of shears, and the little girl has got a cat looking up going, Mummy's a very good head trimmer. And the mother's like, yes, I am. And it was all done with my left hand, but it was kind of nice because I was like turning what the kids said into illustrations, but I was doing this at night when they were at bed. So I think I've always found a little bit of time, but it's right, because teaching is like full time, completely full time. I mean, and it's difficult to find your little niche.
Absorbent.
But you've got to, otherwise you feel like all you're doing is just giving, and you've got to sometimes find that space for yourself,
But I also imagine at that point you find a voice as a teacher, because then you started also doing more and more teaching experience, not only in London but also around the world.
Yes.
So
yes. It's different. It's very different in America, teaching modules. And
in which way?
Well, in England you have the students there and they're working on a project, and it's consistent. You've got a 2-week project, they're working on it. In America they've got 3 hours with you, and then they go to another class, and the other class might be psychology or English, or so it felt quite different. I couldn't have them
for as long as you wanted
what I was used to having them for. So you had to construct the classes differently to make sure you gave them enough work so that they could take it home and manage to do everything without you, which is how we teach now, by the way, in England. Exactly. But it wasn't in the 90s.
Wasn't like that.
No, it wasn't like that in the 90s. So it felt alien to me, but it helped me when I came back, because then I realised that modular system is now how we kind of do it in England as well.
Okay, so do you think it works?
Look, it's lovely having that. I love being at art college, where you just went in and it's like being in a studio. And the tutor would just wander around, rolling his cigarette, having it, talking to you about your work. And, you felt like you were in a studio. And, of course, nowadays that doesn't happen, It's
more like a jamming, but
you go in, you get what you have to do, and then you go away to do it at home. So I lament that. But I think the system is, it does work. And the students do get more intense teaching in a shorter period of time. Okay. They get more kind of quality teaching in a shorter period of time than maybe I did when I was at college. Mine was much more freeform.
What do you think is your voice as a teacher? And what makes you special? What makes you love the experience? What makes you having a good relationship with your student? What makes you to feel like you care?
That's a difficult question to ask for me to answer, because it's
because you have to be good with you.
I like to think I inspire the students. I get very enthusiastic. So if something's happening, I get very enthusiastic at what we're doing, and so I think giving across that enthusiasm is something that I quite like to, focus on, and to be generous with my knowledge, and to guide them and to show them what I have learned as much as I can, and to be personable, and to listen a lot, and to always be that they're the most important people then at that time, and to have fun. I mean, I think the biggest thing is to have fun, especially in the classroom when you're drawing, and you know that sense of this is enjoyable. This is not something that is, if you're not enjoying
should create
it,
any suffering.
Yes.
Yeah, and I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that when you were there at the teaching at London College of Fashion, at some point you were like, okay, then now we are gonna go to London Fashion Week and we are gonna draw. And everyone was like, what do you mean? These people, the catwalk is a fast thing, and I'm not gonna get the model. And you yourself thought, oh, this is true. I never have done this. And now you are kind of a specialist in that territory, and one in a million, because nobody does that, just you, I think. But you are very good at it, and it's not an easy thing to do. How did that started?
That is exactly how it did start then.
You decided, okay, let's do this.
Let's do it.
And you did it.
Well, you know, I was given tickets to London Fashion Week by a PR agency who is a friend of mine. And she said, do you want to bring your students? And I went, be fantastic, they'll love it. We're at London College of Fashion. Of course we want to go to London Fashion Week.
But we are going to draw.
We are obviously going to draw, because that's what we're illustrators. So I said to the students, come on, we're going to go. And they said, but how do we do this? And I going, well, I don't really know. But we draw quickly. That's what we do. So I set up the model in the classroom. I said, can you walk around the classroom for this life drawing class? Just walk around, walk up and down, and we're going to draw you. And so we're starting to. I thought,
perfect session.
I'm going to start drawing. I'm going to start doing this. And I thought, actually, I really like this. This is quite good fun. So I thought, oh, exciting. I can't wait to go to London Fashion Week myself to do this now. So we went, and I think it was 2013 or 11. I just found my niche, because at two weeks a year, I couldn't take those weeks off because it's Fashion Week and we are in fashion, so that my job would allow me to take those time off and go to see all the shows and get my knowledge. And so I thought, I can do drawing in shows, and so I get to go to the shows and I get to draw. Because otherwise I've got no other time to, because that job at London College of Fashion was really intense. And there was no time. I came home at night and I didn't want to draw. I was too tired, and I had to prepare for the next day. So, but in those 2 weeks I could draw. And so literally I started to develop that technique, which suited me perfectly. And it's kind of grown over the years. You see my first drawings, and then you see my paintings at the easel when you were they're quite different.
When you were an artist in residency. I am very interested, because also drawing on your iPad and being kind of an ambassador for Apple was what brings you back to the scene.
I know.
But also
amazing.
Digitally. And the problem, the reason why you started getting less and less work was because of the digital era. So somehow the arts, books, literature, cinema versus video, the lesson I feel we should learn is that everything fits everything, and at the end nothing disappears really. It's just you get through process of recycle, and here we are. There's a lot of people drawing on iPad, making their lives easier somehow, and also doing an amazing work. But when you started, my curiosity is, were you there with sketchbooks? Were you there with something digital?
To begin with, I was there with paper.
Paper,
and all my, I had a bag like this which was stuffed, and I had pencils down here and in my, I mean, every photograph of me, I look awful because I'm biting a pencil, or because I was like lots of materials as much as I could carry in that front row.
You look
there.
lovely because you look so engaged with the situation.
I loved it.
That shows how the beauty of someone just shines when you are doing what you love to do. And all your pictures, all your photos, when you are there sitting and drawing, makes you shine really. All people around you is just there, and you are really engaging with the situation. I love it. It shows, and also it's amazing that you can do that. What's the system you developed to be able to remember and respond so quickly?
It's a training of just drawing. I mean, the more you draw, and I've always drawn, always. I mean, not necessarily when I was a little girl, but I mean, it's from art college. That drawing was always so instilled in me. It was a bit sort of like the David Hockney years back in when he was, you know, I loved him when I was an art student, but he always drew, and I loved that kind of like, I just love putting pencil to paper. So I think the more you draw, and the more you draw the figure, which is why I go to all those life drawing classes, just to keep drawing, because you get a blueprint in your head that you draw from. That when you are drawing something and you look up and it's gone, you've got that in your memory that you can then fill it in, you know, that you know where that's meant to go. So it just becomes like a second nature to you a little bit, the more information you can put in through observational drawing too, drawing from life as much as you can, so that when you need it, you can pull from it to use it. But it is, for me, the quicker, the better. I mean, if I have a 1 minute pose, sometimes I think it's better than when I've got a 20-minute pose, because it's got more life to it. For me, it sings more. But so I get excited by the constraints of being pushed in next to people, or with all those photographers around me. That adds to what I like. I don't want to be comfortable. I don't want to sit there, you know, everything nice. I almost want that hustle and bustle, because that makes me more excited. And then when it all goes quiet, because it does before a show, and then the lights come up and the model comes out, then
it's
I
like
just go straight in.
Brilliant moment, I guess, right? The
yes,
of anticipation.
Yes.
I love fashion shows. I think they have that combination of everything. Is visual, it's in real life, there's people around you, there's people in front of you, there are stars, there are us, our audience, but at the same time it's really fictional. It's really out of life. It's really not about a specific, very concrete narrative. It's music and lights. That
it's drama. I mean, it is
it's
theatre.
Drama.
It's theatre.
Drama.
It's theatre, and that's what I love about those fashion shows. I mean, some of the ones that from Paris. I mean, I've drawn in when I went to Milan. We went to a nightclub, and the models came out on the stage, and then the band came, and the models were dancing like it was a nightclub. It was amazing. And the ball was going around, and the lights were going, and everyone was watching this show. But it was like being in a nightclub. That was so exciting. But it is just the pure drama of it all. And it is theatre. Yeah, it's beautiful.
And then you started with your papers and pencils and pens and everything. And why Apple reach you and offer you the opportunity to try? Did you already? Were you already drawing on digital?
No, I didn't know anything about digital drawing. In fact, I was like complete novice to it. I mean, obviously I knew about Photoshop and I knew how to do that, because you have to learn all those along the way, but digital drawing, and they called myself and the creative director of London College of Fashion and a student, and they said, because I was course leader of fashion illustration, they chose me, and they called us in and they said, we would like you to experiment with this new iPad Pro and go away and then come back and tell us what you think, and try and draw with it like you would draw normally. So I was like, started to use it, and I was just like, oh my god, this is the future. I had this vision of the art class with an easel with everybody with their iPads on it with the model. I mean, all of a sudden I saw the future. It was quite extraordinary.
It wasn't scary for you. You didn't resist to the opportunity.
I got excited by
jump into this.
To begin with, I should have gone, go away. I mean, but what was interesting was that, like I told you, digital had ousted us all, and then for me, it pulled me back into it again.
But I guess because of the experience of being out because of the digital, maybe unconsciously that creates a resistance in us human beings in front of some kind of stuff that we don't know if we are going to manage well, because all your life you have been training yourself to do this thing, this craft relationship with the real drawing. So I'm curious about how was your attitude? Or absolutely welcoming it, or you were kind of let's see how it goes. I don't know if I'm gonna like this.
No, I've never been asked this question, but actually I was mesmerized with it. I think I just instantly kind of fell in love with it too much, actually. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
I can just go with this in my bag.
I can just go with it.
It's so chic.
I got a nice case for it. I just go up to a fashion show. I don't have to have all that stuff. And, I was literally with my wheelie going to fashion shows. I felt like
I've seen you.
And then I was turning up with this fabulous iPad that everybody was like curious to see it. And you could just do, drawing after drawing after drawing. I think I was addicted to it, to be honest with you.
The drawings you did were amazing because you could combine photography with drawing, and the backgrounds were sometimes the people in the show. And then you had the perfect drawing of the dress with the lady walking. The drawings were really interesting, and what I found amazing is that when you started, you couldn't really compete with the photographers, could you? No, because you needed extra time at home to finish off the drawings and then send them, but the photographers could do that work very quick.
Yes,
and the images were we know away. Photography,
digital
is super as a document is super realistic. So, but when you started drawing with the iPad Pro, then you could do everything even faster than photographers.
Yes. I know it. Do you know? I have a little story that I went to New York, and this was before digital.
Okay.
The iPad, sorry, before iPad drawing. I went and I said I'm drawing from the catwalk, and I can and showing my portfolio to Vogue, and the art director was like, I must show it to the photographer director of photography. So he said, these are great. He said, but it will take you too long to turn this around. I said, well, I can photograph. He said, you still got a delay. You can't. This won't work. And I went, oh, okay, maybe you're right. There is a delay. I've got to get them scanned in, and they've got to be before I can get them out there quickly, like photography. And then about 2 years later, I came back to England, and iPad got me the iPad Pro, and I was like, literally the minute I was doing the drawing, I was pressing send, and they were gone, even before I left the seat on the front row. And I went, I want to go back to New York and tell that and tell that director of photography, I am quicker than photographers now.
Yes, I guess photographers
because they're still putting their equipment
things away and trying to Photoshop the photos and prepare everything to send them, and you already did it.
Yeah, okay. It was done.
So for your clients, it was amazing, was it?
Yeah, so I could get work out instantly and quicker than anybody else had seen what was on the shows.
And what kind of clients were waiting for that final product to arrive? For example, brands, magazines. Who was the people that was receiving these drawings the moment
they were going out? Well, it depended. If I was doing a commission for someone, it will be the art director and who is going to go out probably on their site. It's normally online. It'd be something online. Be a blogger. It would be some article written about the shows. So it would be editorials mainly.
Yeah.
So they'd get them straight away and be able to write their articles, and off they'd go straight away. But
so you need to do a lot of negotiation before?
Sorry?
Did you needed to do some negotiations before?
Some of them were, and some of them were. I was just sending out to bloggers or people who I knew that would then be able to take those and put them online straight away.
Okay.
It just depended, you know, a lot of the work I was doing that was for myself and then getting it straight out. But a lot of it might have been, I was asked, can you, for the magazine, can you go and draw? And then as soon as you do it, give it to us because we'll get it online and then we'll put it into the magazine. So they could get it really quickly and get it online. So this is the next day they could be put the show images on whatever platform they were using.
And your featured in the movie of Vivienne Westwood, there in the catwalk drawing. How was
that? Was backstage actually.
Backstage
for Vivienne, yeah.
How was the relationship with her, with the brand? What did you do for them?
They were just I did drawings backstage, recordings, so like archival drawings really for them, for their social media. But the film was being made. Well, I was called in to do the drawings backstage, and that just happened to be when the film was. Well, the film took a year to make, but she videoed me doing the drawings, filmed me doing the drawings as I was working backstage. So I just popped up in the middle of that film, which was so funny because I didn't know I was in it.
Really?
I was like, what am I doing there?
You were surprised.
I was so surprised. It was very surprising, but it was lovely being backstage because, you know, there's just so much hubbub and so much excitement before the show, and just seeing how they get everything ready.
And because you like that rhythm of things getting exciting and quick, and there's nothing like the backstage of a catwalk in that sense, because they have to change the model so quick. Quickly. Everything has to be perfectly organized in order to look so
seamless. I know,
and beautiful.
It's quite extraordinary. And the after party backstage. And then Vivienne would come after with her bouquet, and then the champagne would flow, and it was just lovely seeing, you know, everyone relaxed after the show and having that I'm still drawing, obviously.
everyone everywhere
partying up.
There's a quote, I think it's from you, that says, however much technology and digital processes feature in fashion communication, nothing can replace the skill and craft of fashion illustration. The expertise demonstrated by the practice of fashion illustration is irreplaceable. And you made a beautiful film in 2007 that I think you posted online in 2013. That I found it amazingly inspiring. It's about the work of Neil Gilkes.
Oh, that's right, yes.
And it's just heartbreaking. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so immersive the way you bring anyone to the world of this particular tutor that was very interesting, and he used to work in St. Martin's, right?
Yes.
Was he part of the collective you had? The video was called 5 for 5?
5 by 5. It was 5 artists, and they were awarded 5 drawings to go into an exhibition. And Neil was our tutor. He was part of the Howard Tanguy School of, who's also a fashion illustrator. He's a tutor at Central St. Martin's. And Neil Gilkes was... Gilkes, yeah. I would call him Gilkes for ages, but it's Gilkes. He was under that similar way of teaching. And it is a particular inspiring way of teaching. And that is kind of the way I like to teach. And it was very immersive, and it's very physical.
Very physical.
And you know, you're really kind of, again, it's a little bit like art therapy, because you're doing all these little exercises to begin with, and he'd tell you stories too, which you'd have to respond to. Weird little stories that just to get your hand moving. And it was more that you're not going to do this. It was more that you're going to do this. So he'd made us do like dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, da 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 da. And then he'd go 1, 10, 5, 2, 1, 10, 15, 16, 16, 16, 10. So we'd be literally going around this. So our arms were moving. And it's just to get you warmed up, get you into the headspace of drawing, and to open up that rhythm of mark making. And so you're not doing, I call it knitting or crocheting, when you're doing this a lot. You know, it's like, let's make a line, let's make that line the most important thing. And I think that's getting back to that punk era too. It's that line. And when I do that, I kind of almost make my hand into a fist. Let's drag that line through and make it, that is a line.
And do you think people should always draw standing, right?
Yeah.
Because when you sit down,
Yeah.
you lose that energy.
You're passive. And drawing should be physical.
But he, for example, was almost
Dancing.
dancing and
with his eyes closed.
But he was sitting in many of
Yes.
them. But you could see the feet moving, or
Yeah.
the upper part of the body moving in a way that even if he was sitting, he wasn't static. It
Yes.
It was a very
Yes, active, not passive. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I did a session with you actually as a model in London College of Art of Fashion.
Yes.
That was
Yes.
with a tutor. You weren't there as a tutor, but you called someone that I can't remember the name in this moment, but it was exactly like that.
Was she female?
She was a female.
She must have been Helen Bullock.
Yes, it was
Helen
her.
Bullock. She's,
of course.
She
now
was
remember
his
the
model
name.
in the film, by the way.
Oh my God!
So
Because as soon as I saw the
yes,
film,
yes.
I thought about her.
Yes.
And that experience I had with you and her, that was so good and so
Yes.
exciting and so alive. And I remember she asked everyone, stand
Oh,
up,
I don't
move,
know,
do what the model is doing. And everyone was posing in the same way I was.
That's something I always get. Do what the model's doing. Feel the pose. Because if you can feel where the weight and everything is, then you'll be able to draw it. But no, Helen was the model in that film, and she wasn't an illustrator then.
Oh my God!
She
this
was.
is amazing.
I know, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? That, but I didn't realise you were the model when she was one of the tutors. I love bringing her in because
Yes.
she was like, you know, exactly as
the same energy,
same
and
energy. It's all
and the
about
same
energy.
conviction, because
Mhm.
also I think one important aspect of doing any creative work is to believe in it. It doesn't matter what is going to happen with that after, but the moment you are embracing, trying to embody that energy to create something, just believe it. Just do it with all your heart, all your mind, all your body, everything together, and 100% there.
If you believe it and you believe in what you're doing, whoever looks at it will also believe it. If you feel it's not good and and I'm unsure of it, the person that looks at it will think the same.
With
and
the
that's
same
what I say to
sensation.
students: trust in yourself, believe in yourself, and don't be frightened of it, because then somebody else will look at it and they will feel the same. They won't be frightened of it. And people want to trust in it, you know. They want to trust in it, and if you did it with trust, they will see it with the same eye. Yeah.
At the beginning of the interview, I said that one of your motivations was bringing life, movement, spontaneity to the mark making, and I can see clearly that now in your fashion illustrations, in your drawings, in your art in general. But was like that? No, it wasn't like that when you were at the beginning of your career. And I can see the change. I can see the journey inside and outside. But where do you think was the breaking point? I tried to ask you this before, but I don't know if we got a conclusion.
The breaking point between what?
Between the style you started having, which was big, but very detailed, and very figurative, and with lot of information, and the style you have now, which is much more expressive. It's much more about movement than anything else. It's very charming and lovely, but it's less detailed.
I suppose maybe, I mean, I can say that came when I started doing my MA, but I think really the style that I have developed really came when I got that job at London College of Fashion. I mean, that for me was one of the nicest highlights in that, because before I had that, I was teaching in America. Then I came back and I was 12 years teaching foundation studies, course leader there in Rochester. which is the first year before you do your degree. And again, that was, I couldn't do much of my own work then. I was just drawing in my sketchbook. But I think when I really started to develop that, I think it all of a sudden made sense for me. I got this job being course leader of fashion illustration, and it was like my illustration, which I loved, and my drawing, which I always loved, and fashion, which I mean, I'd never really, I mean, I'd love fashion, but I'd never studied it to deliver it as a degree. So I had to really kind of like immerse myself. I had to give myself a really quick course in fashion and the history of fashion illustration. I mean, I knew a lot about everything, but not specifically about that subject. So I think that suddenly opened up this whole new world for me that I was delivering to my students, but then I was also absorbing for myself. And that is why when I first got the job, it was 2009, but it wasn't really till 2013, 14 that I started to develop my work into fashion illustration. So it was that being a course leader of that particular course that enabled me to then, everything just made sense then.
Yeah.
All my previous training just suddenly kind of went, it all makes sense now for me. This is where I'm meant to be.
Somehow you were preparing along all your journey previous.
Not knowing where I was going to go, but then it just made sense.
Creating the steps to achieve that. How did you make sure that the work you produce communicates unity, harmony, and love?
I don't think it's something I necessarily consciously do. I think it's it is just there as because those are the things that I actually naturally feel anyway, you know, and I think it's quite important actually as communicators that we do think about what we're doing and saying with our work, and it is something that this unit I've just finished with the students, and that is something it's like sustainability as well, and we're looking at cultural appropriation, and we're looking at diversity and you know, inclusivity and all the rest of it, and it is obviously we have to teach it. And students have to be aware of it, so it's becoming naturally part of our thinking as artists. Because I think we realise that it's an important platform because people are looking at it and they're being inspired by it. So you do think I do have to think about the models I'm drawing and their ethnicity and what they're wearing and what is that saying and how am I, you know, maybe. How am I bringing that into my work? So it is something you consciously think about, but it becomes for me almost second nature because that's all part of my work anyway. You know, I'm not going to because of my background working for the gay news and working for the women's press and for working for sort of a much more kind of you know, subcultural magazine in my original, you know, beginnings, that it's become part of what I do anyway. You know, I kind of a little bit see myself as being an outsider, and I don't know why I think that. I always feel like I'm sometimes looking in on it, but so it is something that I would never, I don't exclude anything when I'm drawing. It's part of the way I think anyway, but I know right now it's become something that is part of what I'm teaching as well. So we have to then, you know, discuss it, give lectures on it and bring students' awareness to it. And even though you think, well, they're already aware, they must be, it's part of their being now to think like that, but you still do have to teach it. And students still have to think about, well, especially sustainability, how do I incorporate that into my work? And that is something, as a makeup artist, how am I doing that? So I have to be aware.
How do you do it?
Me personally?
Yes.
Well, I mean, now the iPad Pro is...
It's a good way. It's a good to start.
It's a good because you're not using any of that materials. Yeah. But the classes I've been given, in a small way, I've been getting the students to use cardboard, because we were getting all this packaging or everyone's getting things delivered now. So cardboard's everywhere. So I go up and cut cardboard
Newspaper.
up, use that newspaper. I paint it with white household paint, which we've all got hanging around our houses. And then I'm using toothbrushes to draw with, and twigs off the tree, and thinking about just trying to use materials that, especially paper. I think that's the biggest thing. Trees. I mean, paper's going to be a luxury,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in 50 years time, and we use it so gaily when we're drawing, and
Yes.
you know, go through reams of it.
It's
So,
part of the sometimes even of the spirit and the dynamic. Okay, another
more
one,
paper, another one. It's just like, you've got to really think about.
Yeah.
So I do get the students to get newspaper, a free newspaper, and then just paint it white, and it's a beautiful surface to work on, and it actually adds to the drawing. So so just thinking about your materials and where they're sourced from and where the dye's from. I mean, I made a big batch of tea the other day with tea bags, and seeped the tea bags because I'm using that to stain paper with to make a colour. And so just sometimes just trying in a little way to think about what you're actually doing.
And do you see the universities taking action, thinking about these big problems of society?
Yes, of course. It's huge. I mean, and it's something that, you know, 10 years ago would be like, well, what is sustainability?
Yeah,
I don't understand what it is.
How can we do anything?
How can we do anything? But then when you break it all down and you really think about it and you bring awareness to it, that it's been filtered into lots of fashion designers and houses, and they're all using recycled materials, recycled fabrics, old materials that they already have. Denim in particular is huge. And just how people are recycling the materials they already got, that already exist. So we're not making new. I mean, obviously, everyone's buying charity shops, and but what happens when the charity shops haven't got any more clothes in them? You know, because if people aren't buying new clothes, they're not feeding into that source. So we had quite a lot of discussions about that with the students, so they can, you know, just start to get them thinking, because they're the ones, the future.
Yeah.
And I would have thought, well, they know about it anyway, but in fact they don't. They thought, I never thought about that.
And it's interesting because fashion is one of the industries that still have more contradictions, because they work for luxury somehow, and they as a student of fashion, you want to relate to some sort of things that are not really necessary, are more like a luxurious things you relate with desire, not with need. And then big ethics discussions are around at the moment.
Yes.
And we as human beings never know really how to relate with one thing or another without feeling that we are being contradictory.
Yes.
And I guess being inside of a fashion school is not easy in a moment like this.
Well, it certainly raises quite a lot of issues and a lot of questions, and
questioning. A lot of questioning.
You know, yes,
around,
of course,
yeah,
because
yeah.
this is the industry of excess and has been, and fast fashion, and so
and creating necessities you don't really have.
You don't really need. Yes, so there is that kind of dichotomy that you kind of go, how are we going to actually get our head around? But in fact, you know, it is being addressed, and it is being talked about, and most of the designers now, that is their prime function. Now, it might be that they are actually, through their work and their success and their money, that money is being filtered into helping other organizations and other you know, areas of, you know, rejuvenation. So, you know, money is being pumped into, you know, they're giving money to causes, so they're helping that way by contributing, you know, to charity work.
Yeah,
really.
and probably to a different kind of production.
Yes, getting people in prisons to help do some of the work. You know, people. You know, and then there's this whole big, you know, project with using prisoners to produce silk screens and do embroideries, and so it gives them a skill. So it's re-educating, retraining them to do something when they come out as well. So that is, using
sense of belonging and sense of pride also, because
and making money
when you
while they're
make
there.
something, it really challenge your self-esteem in a good way, And you were in Italy recently, in Villa Elena in Tuscany, improving, let's say, improving is not a good word, but trying to get into also oil painting and a little bit more traditional schools of art. How do you see your evolution in that way? And we were talking off record. How do you feel sometimes more European than even English? And I guess do you want to keep working for Europe and expanding in that way? How do you see the future?
It was lovely, now that we've gone Brexit, I don't know about that part of it, because that transition of working wherever we want to in Europe has kind of disappeared a little bit. So I don't know, because COVID's come, that whole Brexit thing's been shelved, or our thinking about it has, so we're not really focusing on that. But as soon as COVID's over, it'll be like, oh, now this has hit us big time, that especially for freelancers in the fashion industry, because the fashion industry, it relies on the whole of Europe.
Does it have affect you already?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I think the industry has been affected by COVID terribly. The fashion industry. I mean, that is something that we don't know what's happening there at the moment. But it's taken a real hit. Obviously, there's been no fashion shows, and so that everybody that involved in the fashion industry has had to take quite a tumble with that. All the stylists, the hair and makeup, the sets, the props, the photographers. I mean, it obviously is happening still in editorials, but that the spectacle of fashion weeks, I don't has really. And PR agencies have just sort of, everyone's really struggling. So I don't really know how that's going to pan out, but no one really knows. But the certainly getting back to Villa Elena, for me, going back to that was delightful, because I do feel more I feel European, and that's what we were saying earlier. I don't feel necessarily English. I feel like more I belong to a European sort of aesthetic and environment. So being in Villa Elena was just absolutely, because it's surrounded by about 15 artists from all over the world too. And when we're sitting all that interaction, that was lovely. It's just sort of amazing. Everyone's doing something somewhere and a connection somewhere else. So it was just wonderful sitting around the dinner table with all those artists in the evening. That was just great, and the connections I made. But no, and also it was lovely being close to Florence and going to see all that beautiful work there, and studying the paintings and really sort of, and I mean that came sort of nodding back to the work that I was doing back in the 80s, because it was very meticulous, very painted, focusing on the hands,
some portraits. They look a little bit in between what you do now and what you used to do. Yes,
I was trying to but really sort of focusing on narrative within a picture too, and sort of incorporating elements into my paintings that by studying the paintings over there, which was just joyous. I mean, it was a real luxury and treat to do that. I had to apply for that, so, and I'm doing a concert.
That was a residency,
artist residency, and I made a friend with a musician, Israeli musician. He's a pianist, Tal Walker, and he is just come over to do his PhD at the Royal College of Music, and he's doing a concert in St. James this month, I think, the end of maybe this end of this month actually. I've got to look at my diary, and I'm going to set up and paint while he is playing the music.
Oh, that's great!
In this church.
That kind of collaboration.
So it's a collaboration,
really enriching.
Yeah, I can't
for
wait.
Both parts, and for the audience is great.
Yeah, so I'm going to be. I don't know what I'm going to paint. I have to sort of maybe think about this or have an inspiration in my head, because it has to come naturally and at the time I can't plan it too much ahead. But it was something that we're going to write a proposal to go and do another residency to develop this idea of, combining the painting with the music. I mean, I know, drawing to music is something we've all done at school, our
responding to music and painting.
So it is something that's always in art schools have been something that we've done. But I want to do this as more of a kind of a practice that we work as a duet. He is amazing, by the way.
Ambitious.
I mean, I'm like in awe of this man, his music and how he plays the music.
Well, let us know so we will be there. If
I'll
we
put
can.
it up on my Instagram.
And to finish this interview that has been lovely, what would you recommend to someone young after having such a long, successful and interesting and changing, exciting career? What would you recommend to someone that maybe sees now the possibilities and feels a little bit scared, a little bit?
Yes, of course, but don't be. Because I tell you, when I was an art student in the 70s, 73, my tutors, some of them were going, oh, I don't know why you're bothering being in the art profession. There's nothing there for you. There's no work for anybody. Oh, it's, like moaning about what they haven't got. Not all of them, by the way. Well, there was a few, obviously, that did say that. And it was just sort of like, because this is what I want to do and I'm going to just keep on going and I don't care. And I suppose it's like, what else am I going to do? I mean, I don't want to work in the shop. I'm hopeless at maths. I'm actually quite good at writing now, by the way. I'm much better at writing.
You should write that book.
I've started writing things down actually, but at the time I said, well, I just love, I want to be in the arts. I didn't know what I wanted to be. Photography was something, or I didn't quite know what when I first started out, but I just thought, well, this is what I want. It feels in my heart, this is what I want. So I carried on, because it will change. In 10 years' time, that young artist will be in their 30s and life will be different and it will change and you'll be there with it. So if you've got a love for it and you've got a passion for it, just stay with it, because life changes all the time and the circumstances change all the time.
And crises, we had crises along the history all the time. And talking with you is actually very revealing in that way, because you were talking about the 70s and then the 90s and then now, and you're still pretty much alive and producing amazing.
Just about. But a sketchbook is something you always got to
something
have.
amazing. No, I don't know.
Keep your notebook sketchbook handy, even in the times when you can't do it and you might be working in a job which doesn't allow you to be creative, but you've got your little sketchbook that you can get out in the tube and you can draw or write or do whatever, that is your Bible.
But never give up.
Never give up. No, never give up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Your time. You are a legend, you know that.
Aww.
And it's really been a huge pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for staying with us until now.
Yes. Ciao.
Thank you. Thank you so much for staying with us this far. I hope you enjoyed that. And if that's the case, I would like to suggest you to enjoy the rest of our content. Also, if you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so you can get notifications every time we share a new episode with all of you.